It is our third installment talking about positive view of self, positive view of others, negative view of self, negative view of others. And today we're going to talk a bit more specifically about shame, blame, and humiliation. Now, these are really, really important categories. Again, shame is such an important thing, concept. There's a lot of good research, a lot of good content on shame. We have some on blame, and we have less on humiliation. But in the continuum and categories, the ways that we understand attachment science, love energy, knowing the nuances or seeking to better look for the nuances of what is shame compared to blame, compared to humiliation is pretty helpful. Firstly, because although you might use the shame, you might discover that the word blame feels better for you, or blaming. Although you use the word shame or blame, you might discover that using the word humiliation feels better for you, or laming, like we talked about last time. With a experiential attachment focused therapy, we really want to understand the client's language. We see that as really important because the words that express your internal working model, the better they fit for you, the better you feel heard, the better you feel seen, the better you feel known, the more corrective the experiences of reconciling those parts that feel negative and integrating them into your positive view of self so that you can have more positive view of others, more positive interactions with self, more positive interactions with others. So shame, why does it get so much attention? I really think, because I do think about these things, that shame, the risk when shame shows up is it's just like it can be so all-consuming, especially when we have more big T trauma, more unchecked trauma. So you could have tons of little T trauma that's unchecked, and that could be as debilitating as one big T trauma. Again, in our first video, when we talked about trauma, we talked about small T, big T trauma, but I didn't say that. And so you might be like, I don't really have a lot of trauma. I have a lot of little things, but when something bad happens, I lose my footing completely. Maybe you have a lot of little traumas that are unchecked. And so then it dysregulates you as much as if you had one big event. We are all unique individuals, and we are all trying to understand our own unique story, because whatever is registering as flawed inside of us, whether it's a big or a little thing, it doesn't really matter. If we're lodging it as flawed, things we tend to lodge as flawed would be trauma, abuse, negative view of self, negative self-talk, mistakes we've made. Even a mistake, if we view it as flawed and we try to avoid it, it can be as detrimental as a major trauma that somebody else has gone through. Our flaws belong with us. Our trauma belongs with us. The abuse that we've endured belongs with us. The problematic things we've done to other people all belong with us. Our past comes along. And so this person in this present moment, the more positive my view of self I have, the more better I can reach back and grab those parts. I think I didn't quite finish my thought about why shame is debilitating. But when shame shows up, it can be so all-consuming that people can just fall right into it. So we call it like the shame spiral. And the sort of movement with shame tends to be very in. Usually people feel shamed, and lots of times there's a freeze, flee reaction, sometimes a fawn, but shame tends to really internalize, and people can get lost in it. Shame tears can present very different than other types of tears. So there's this real cocooning in. Whereas the action tendency for blame, somebody who has more of a blame experience, is this moving away. So shame, I feel so bad, I move in, and it feels so bad, and I'm stuck in how bad it feels. Whereas blame, it feels so bad in here that I move way out. Sometimes I'll call it like a popcorning out or fireworking out. So the person moves out this way. I've endured blame, or blame has been so uncomfortable for me that it's my strategy. If I'm going to use blame as a strategy, I'm moving away from my inside. If I'm using shame as a strategy, I'm moving in, and I'm more likely to just shame myself, like all the different negative things that I have done or have hopelessly never figured out. Just a different movement, a different nuance. And when we talk about attachment strategy, so the shaming tactic usually is moving, what we'd say moving out, but when I'm moving deep inside of myself, the person next to me is going to feel that I'm moving away. I'm hiding away in my shame. I'm withdrawing away into my shame. Whereas a blaming mechanism is that I'm moving in. If I'm dysregulated and I'm blaming, I am going to move into the relationship. I am going to move in towards you, reach out to you, because if you knew what happened, then you would come back to me. Then we would be worrying and stressing about this together. You can see those differences where one partner is more prone to shame, and then the other partner is more prone to blame. And this person is trying to self-regulate. I'm moving out of the relationship inside of me. The other person is trying to regulate, co-regulate. And it's like, I'm going to move into the relationship. I'm moving away from my inside and towards you. Sounds a bit confusing. But when we move in, when shame takes over, a person gets so enveloped that the people around them are going to usually see that the shamed person is disappearing somehow, walking away, silence, withdrawing, however that looks. Whereas a person who's more prone to blaming is probably going to turn the volume up. They get more expressive, explosive, who's the bad guy, those sorts of things. So the people who are watching the more blaming person are going to see, okay, this person is really coming into my space and I am being emotionally impacted by this person. The emotional impact is I'm being drawn into the blame. The emotional impact of somebody being around somebody who's shaming themselves is that we're feeling cut off from their emotion. Different ways of noticing it. Now, if I'm shaming myself or if I'm blaming other people, I'm in a different sort of situation with my negative view of self. If I'm observing somebody shaming themselves, or I'm observing somebody blaming the others, I'm in a different negative view of self. So it's really fascinating. Like the more we get into this positive view of self and why it can feel so negative, to start to discover and theorize more and more, is that it's a lot of moving parts and dynamics. We are not in a vacuum. We're people in relationship with others. My relationship with myself impacts my positive view of self. My relationship with other people impacts my positive view of self. My negative view of self impacts my relationship with myself. And my negative view of self influences my relationship with other people. So shaming and blaming, and then humiliation. So humiliation is really, I didn't talk about it when I was talking about trauma earlier, but humiliation is really, it is a part of trauma. Humiliation is very unloving, and humiliation is debilitating. I think that it's a way of really wanting to express to somebody that they are beyond repair, that they should feel demoralized to the point that there's no hope or no recovery for them. So if you've endured humiliation, the very scary risk is that people who've been humiliated might just lash out and humiliate others, just like people who've been shamed might shame others, just like people who've been blamed might blame others. That's not always true. You may have endured a lot of shaming and see that your faux pas is blame. You might have endured a lot of humiliation and see that your faux pas, your negative communication pattern is to shame or to blame, right? Like we might placate and just try to like remove any fault from anybody. There's no hard and fast rules about how trauma, negative relationship patterns, abuses, environmental experiences are going to impact each person. We are unique entities, and pain is subjective. Our internal negative view of self is subjective. Our negative view of others is subjective. You are a unique story to discover for yourself and for others, and hopefully in therapy. But you don't have to go to therapy. Not everybody does. This is fascinating. There's a wealth of knowledge. There's a universe within you, as Rumi might say. And Rumi is probably right. There is a universe inside of you. There's this whole large story. And if you're gaining one thing from this 3-part series, I hope that this is part of it. Maybe the big part of it is this complicated, nuanced, valuable, unique story of who you are and how your pain has impacted you is unique to who you are. Your negative view of self is unique to who you are. And that's why, if this was an easy problem, you would have figured it out on your own. And that's why it's so great that you're here, starting to consider those nuances of the difficult things that you've endured, trauma, abuse, negative words from others, negative view of self, shaming, blaming, shame, blame, humiliation, all of these things. So when we listen to the story of ourselves, we can better do that one thing that I talked about last installment. Really, our goal is to figure out a way to start speaking about our story, naming. So much of the work in positive view of self is really about naming the story in a place where we are emotionally safe. So again, if you're looking for a therapist, the number one criterion that I really advocate for is you want to find somebody you feel good with and that you view them as an emotionally healthy person, that the environment that you're in feels emotionally safe. Our confidants should feel emotionally safe. And hopefully we all have at least one good person in our life. We only need really one. And hopefully it's a love relationship that we feel emotionally safe with. If we get a therapist, that's a bonus. If we have a friend alongside of a love relationship, or we have 2 good friends, if we have great relationship with our kids, there's all these bonuses all over the place. Collect the bonuses. That's just bonus. So the goal is positive view of self. The more I have a positive view of myself, the more I can have a positive view of others, the more positive view of self and others, the more this whole person who is wholly loved can speak life into those old places, those stories where I've made mistakes. I didn't know what I didn't know and I didn't know it. The more this whole person, this positive self, can look forward into the future and saying, I got you, baby, when the bad stuff happens. I'm here. I'm here for it. We're going to keep doing better and better and better. And you will. My personal experience, I just had a beautiful personal experience where I'm like, holy moly, baby. This positive view of self is really helping me to maintain my footing, to a better self-regulation, to rely on my emotionally safe people, to come alongside of me, to encourage me to make better and better decisions. It's a lovely place to belong to. It's a friendly place to belong to. Positive view of self, that we can hear ourselves with loving ears, see ourselves with loving eyes, and know ourselves with a loving mind. So that we can find one other, or as many others as you can, who will hear us with loving ears, see us with loving eyes, know us with a positive or a loving mind. Positive mind too. And then we can offer this. The more I can hear, see, know me in love, the more I can offer to hear, to see, and to know others with love. And we want to have these beautiful corrective epiphanies as often as possible. And once we have a positive view of self, we start to really discover what corrective epiphany is. The more we discover what it feels like to have great love energy with others, the more we can cultivate love energy instances. Okay, you guys, I hope that felt good. Lisa's really amazing at asking people to drop comments. Sometimes what we find is people don't necessarily want to drop comments on YouTube. So you don't want to, you can DM, you can track us down, mention in the therapy room. If you have ideas or you want more information, you think somebody else might like the same information, you can let me know. And I can always expand in those ways so that we can continue this love discovery, this attachment science, philosophizing together. Peace. That was number 3. And we'll see you guys next time.